Thanks, Arnold. Pleasure to have you on the show. We'll take it from here. So next, I'd like to talk about going back to the case against big government and against government intervention. We're going to go to another basic economic principle called the production. Go to my trusty visual aids. Production possibilities curve. This is really simple to understand. Just pretend this graph represents XYZ agricultural firm. They produce apples. They also produce bananas. This is the maximum number of bananas they can produce. Alternately, instead of the bananas, they can produce this number of apples. Or they can produce a combination of apples and bananas, which is represented by all the points along this curve. And so any point on this curve represents economic efficiency. Anything within the curve obviously is inefficient, and anything beyond the curve is unattainable. Now obviously firms are trying to push that curve outward all the time with things like increasing investments in resources, inputs into production. They'll also use technology to push that curve out. And these curve you can use on the national level or on the individual level as well. But let's take a look at what happens when government, let's look at the costs of big government to this curve. The first one right off the top is pretty obvious, is taxes. Uncle Sam wants us cut. So obviously it's going to push that curve down. But it doesn't stop there. Then you have regulations, licensings, and all these things are pushing that curve down. And then trade restrictions is a huge one. Trade restrictions are going to push that curve down. And then let's look at government intervention. Well, here's where you might say, well, yeah, but government can push that curve out with this subsidy, right? Especially for an agricultural firm, is very, very common. But you have to remember, in order to push this curve out, government can only do so if it is robbed that production capability from somebody else. It's a classic case of robbing Peter to pay Paul. But the sad part is, you have to rob Peter maybe $2 just to give Paul $1 when it comes to government. And a great place where you can see the data on this is if you look at income redistribution and healthcare distribution from the government. You have to take over $2 or $3 from average working Joe just to give a $1 benefit to somebody else. Now, why is that? Well, it's obvious. It's because government is so big. You have to pay for all the administration costs, the bureaucracy, and government. It's so big. It's got its hands in so many different pots. Sometimes they're fighting against each other, literally. One's helping the tobacco industry with subsidies. The other one's paying for ads against smoking. So government is a classic case. It's the epitome of diseconomies of scale. And so that's why subsidies are always going to push this curve down in the end, because it costs so much money to run. And then the other cost with government intervention obviously is going to be, once you start putting all these subsidies and taxes and regulation, what happens? What are you doing to the markets? You're creating more uncertainty. And that's another cost that's going to push this curve down. Because when firms are uncertain and investors are uncertain about what's going on in Washington, what happens? You see it on Wall Street all the time. The money stops flowing. And so you can see this, I've seen this personally happen on small businesses due to what's happening in Washington, D.C. It can obviously happen because of local government as well. But all these things are hurting your production capabilities. And then, the last one, this is the one that really drives me nuts, is that the more government interferes, the more they create subsidies, they create taxes, they regulate industries, what they're actually doing is they're incentivizing firms like XYZ Agricultural Products to hire somebody for a six-figure salary and send them to Washington to lobby on their behalf. So because the more you interfere, the more you're telling companies, well, lobbying is important because we have to help try to minimize our costs or maximize our subsidies. And think about it, if government never interfered at all, if it never gave tax cuts, gave subsidies, or never gave, never changed its regulations, if it could just maintain them steady, then businesses would never spend that money on lobbying. So every time government does that, I mean, it's incentivizing firms to waste those resources on lobbying. And then the classic Keynesian argument is going to be, well, yeah, but government on the aggregate, when it spends, it's going to push that curve out. It's going to raise GDP for the entire nation. Government spending is so key. It's what helps keep the economy going. And the truth is actually the complete opposite. And we're going to look at some specific data that actually proves that Keynes was wrong on this account. So let's go ahead and let's cut to the graph. So we're going to take a look here in this. This is a great textbook for basic economics. It's called Understanding Microeconomics. Sobel, Gwartney, Stroop, and McPherson. This is the international edition due to cost-benefit analysis. And let's go ahead and cut to page 373 in the international edition. Special topic number 1. This is a graph, and this is what I'm talking about. What it does is it's a graph of 23 countries. All the 23 countries are members of the Organization for Economic Cooperative Development, and it's the graph. What it does is it tracks spending, government spending, as a percentage of GDP, gross domestic product, and then on the y-axis we have the growth rate, decade-long growth rate. And what you have is quite interesting. It's a clear negative correlation of government spending to economic growth. And so, this is 23 countries. This is done over a 40-year span. So it wasn't, a few countries. This is 23 countries that are the major players, in the free economies. U.S., UK, Australia, a host of European countries, South Korea, some Asian countries as well. So you can see there, according to Keynes, as government spending increased, the growth rate should be increasing. But we have an exact opposite effect here. And so the case is pretty clear. The interesting point to me is that all these points must all be in the red, except for maybe 1 or 2. You could possibly say, well, maybe they're right at economic efficiency, because as each point goes more and more, government size, measured by spending, increases. You have negative returns, and so all these governments were already operating in the red, basically. And so it gets pretty clear, that government, big government, costs too much, as determined by the retarded growth, for the benefits it's giving. And as you try to increase government benefits, as people normally call them, government spending, they're actually hurting the economy. And so let's go ahead and let's cut back. So there you have it, folks. We've laid out a foundation for the case against big government and for the economic case against government intervention into the marketplace. I've just given you a starting point. There's a whole lot more you can research, and I really invite you to do some research out there. I invite you to I thoroughly endorse Martin Fridsen's book, Unwarranted Intrusions. It's excellent. Anything by Milton Friedman. As well as I invite you to econ4everyone.wordpress.com. That's econ, the number 4, everyone.wordpress.com. And that's it, folks. So this is Bill the Libertarian signing off.
You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool
okay, music's looped.
all the time. So now
Roll credits.
we gonna stand up for
Said roll credits, and studio sound should be off.
Give it up, stand up for your
Why is the studio light on? Sound crew. Sound crew. Where's my sound crew? Where's my sound crew? Hey, where's my sound crew? Where are you going? Where are you going? Sound crew, get back here. Get back here.